Hi guys, welcome back to the Library of Alexandria. Today guys, as promised, this is part 2 of 3, and 3's not coming for a hot minute, of my KJ Parker series of videos. And if you missed why I like KJ Parker and why I think you should read him, you should check that out right there, that video up there. But today I'm going to be talking about and giving you a guide to his short fiction, which is his novellas and short stories, as well as his standalone novels. And then part 3 will be a guide to his trilogies, of which there are several. But having not read all of his trilogies, I've only read 2 of his trilogies, I cannot speak authoritatively on those. So this will be about his short fiction, novellas, short fiction, and standalones. So without wasting any more time,
Let's get down to business.
let's get down on it. Get down on it. Get down on it. Why you gonna do it if you really don't wanna dance? With your back up on the wall. Get your back up off the wall. There you go. I'm gonna start with talking about his standalones because these are my favorites, and I might as well start with that. And also, there's only 5 of them. So, and I'll do these in the order in which I read them. So, there are 5. The Folding Knife. Here we go. The Folding Knife, Sharps, The Company, The Hammer, and Savages. So the very first one I read was the very first KJ Parker book I read, which is The Folding Knife, Boosh, right here. And The Folding Knife, first of all of these standalones are third person. And this is going to come up a lot when I talk about KJ Parker books. I prefer his third person books to his first person books. His third person books tend to have multiple POVs. The Folding Knife does not, but several of them have multi-POVs, where the first person books do not. And I think that the third-person characters are more differentiated from each other. If you watch my previous video, the first-person narrative character very often doesn't have a name and just kind of feels similar to each other. Not always, like the ones that appear multiple times feel different. Like Siwas Corax in the Siwas Corax trilogy, has 3 whole books to kind of differentiate himself. Saturninus has 3 novellas with which to differentiate himself. But like the one-offs, the standalone novellas, it sometimes feels very similar. And I just prefer the third-person ones. And I also prefer what the third-person novels are about. Like his third-person works, I prefer the plots of those to the first person. So The Folding Knife takes place in the Vasani Republic, which is kind of like Rome, but also like the Medici Venetian city-state kind of time, but also kind of the Medici Italian city-state, mercantile thing of that time period. And as I discussed in my previous video, in every long work that I've read of his, he always hyper-focuses on a certain aspect. And in The Folding Knife, our main character is Basso, and we learn at the very beginning that he made a huge mistake, and we spend the entire book trying to figure out what mistake it was, because the book begins with him having lost everything and gone from being the head of the Vasani Republic to having lost everything. And the whole book is about his rise and how he lost it all. And I was just blown away by this, and it sat with me for a while, because Basso, I stand by this, and many people, and the few people who have read this book, upon my suggestion, everyone agrees that Basso is an incredibly intelligent character, and we actually believe that. Firmly stand behind Basso as one of the most intelligent characters in fantasy, or in fiction. Like, absolutely brilliant and brilliantly written. And so this one is about banking and the economy and controlling the economy and how the geopolitical trade statuses and military statuses with other nations when you are a powerful but small mercantile powerhouse. And Basso navigating these situations where he's not a great person. He's kind of amoral, but the things that he does selfishly end up accidentally producing great results for, the people he governs. So it's fantastic. It is of all of the standalones, I felt the least bad when this one was over. The other ones are just so much heavier when at the end. So that's Folding Knife. This is where I recommend you should start your Parker journey if you have not begun yet. The next one I read of these was actually Sharps, and this is actually my least favorite of the standalones. Sharps it just didn't grab me the way Folding Knife did. I had read some novellas in the meantime before I had read this. This is about two nations that were at war that have signed a peace treaty, and so they have a, I guess, professional fencing bout to kind of seal the deal in the treaty. And things go wrong, and there's this group of fencers who have all been trained, and then there's their attaché to the foreign nation. And there's a lot of fencing. You'll learn everything you ever needed to know about fencing. In this one, the thematic stuff is kind of harder to put a hand on, much more difficult than the Folding Knife. I don't like. There's more characters than just Basso in this one, and they're all POVs, and I don't really like them as much as Basso. And I mean, just coming off of Basso, none of them really wow me. And while it being my least favorite of the Parker standalones still means it's a fantastic book because I love the way that Parker writes, it just didn't grab me. And I thought the end was very good. I think when the events at the very end of the book occur, it sheds some light on all the stuff that came before, but to me it feels just a little bit like it meanders, and I just wasn't super invested. I do need to reread it now that I've read so much Parker, but Sharps it's less depressing, I guess, than the Folding Knife, but I didn't think the rest of the book was as good. But if you really like fencing, then maybe you should start with this one, but I wouldn't suggest that. Still, Sharps, fencing, two hostile nations, at peace now. The next one I read was Boosh the Company, and The Company is my second favorite, and it's close. The Company, I felt so terrible when this book was over. This is about some former war buddies that were in this specialized military unit back during the wars, and now they're going to leave and they're just going to squat on this island that may or may not belong to the government, and they're going to start their own farms. And so they got to bring all the stuff over there, and that's what they're going to live out. They're just going to live out doing that. And the main character is Kunessin, who was kind of the head of this special forces unit. And Kunessin is an absolute sociopath. How terrible human beings are in just their, like I said in the last video, their mundane malevolencies, where they are just awful to each other, and without that internal moral compass or external forces, because on this island there's no law, there's no law enforcement, there's no government. The terrible things that these people will do to each other for the basest of reasons, it's actually quite scary. I was actually scared, not in a horror way, but just the hibbity-jibbities about how evil any of us really could be given those circumstances. I thought it was absolutely an incredible book, and I did not feel good about it when I read it. But it's about friendship. But are you really friends if your friendship was forged in like these specific circumstances, and when you're not in those circumstances and it's decades later or a decade later, are you still friends, or are you just kind of reliving the past? We all experience that. Like if we still see our high school friends or our college friends, like, are we still friends, or are we just acquaintances now, or are we just living in that era where we were friends? But The Company's excellent. Then I read The Hammer, Boosh. The Hammer is the slowest of all of these standalones, but arguably the most depressing. This is just sad. It leaves you with a forlorn feeling that is not good, and you don't know whether to be angry or to weep or to tear your hair out and gnash your teeth and beat your chest. It is very slow, but the denouement, the conclusion of this story, and what everything builds to, is incredibly powerful and meaningful. And it discusses, I mean, in this one, you learn all about how to make a machine shop, everything about manufacturing in that time. It also touches on the idea between those who are civilized and savages, and whether or not those beliefs are accurate, or how we treat the other. He explores this significantly more in the book aptly titled Savages. But this is, Gignomai is the youngest scion of this noble family that got banished from their country, and they got banished to this crappy island, and they're kind of known as the nobles. They kind of are just understood to be the rulers of the island, but they live like up on this big hill, and then the town is down there. And Gignomai decides to leave his family. He says, I'm done. There's an event that occurs, and he's like, I'm not doing it. And he goes down, and he just lives in the town. And he's working on something and for some goal, and we have no idea really what he's doing until we do. And then it's just like, but it's really good. It's really good. Gignomai is just a depressing character. The members of the town and how they relate to Gignomai and how they relate to the people up on the Metocs on the hill, and how it's a book about family and how completely dysfunctional families are. But it's excellent, absolutely excellent. And then finally, Savages, Boosh. This is the one that is most in need of a reread, even more than Sharps, and that's because I read this while I was in rehab after my car accident. I read this in the rehab facility, and so oftentimes I was having to do exercise in my wheelchair, and I was obviously thinking about other things. So I really need to read it again when I have fewer distractions. But Savages definitely explores that relationship between who is the savage, who is civilized and who's the savage, and how foolish it is to make assumptions about another culture without having all of the details, or how foolish it is to assume that people are worse than you because they are different. There's a lot of war in Savages, and you learn a ton about military logistics. There's an entire page about arrow making and how monotonous making a single arrow is. Walks you through the entire process. This one also has multiple characters like Sharps. The company has multiple characters as well, and I think it's better done than in Sharps. But the Hammer and in the company, really, Kunessen is the main character. There are other characters, and then in the Hammer, it's Gignomai, and in the Folding Knife, it's Basso. But this is the first one since Sharps. I don't know which one was written first, but I read it second. That there are several main characters, and it's very hard to figure out who the good guys are. But there's a lot of war, and it is also very just soul-crushing to read. There is a general who is known as the greatest general fighting for the emperor, the king, I forget who it is, and he never makes mistakes, but is this war going to cause him to? He's just tired of it and doesn't want to prosecute it. And then there's this random guy who wakes up, I don't know, on a pile of bodies or something. He doesn't remember who he is, and he just kind of wanders to the town, and he's the guy that learns how to make arrows. And he just, ends up joining the military, trying to figure out who the crap he is and why he woke up with none of his stuff and in wherever he woke up. And I think those are the two main characters. But this one, again, says a ton about war and its pointlessness and the overestimation of one's own abilities versus the underestimation of people you feel are below you, and how there are different levels of savagery. Like, we have what we think, we live in towns, so we're civilized, and you guys live in, tents, and so you're uncivilized. Or we live in this part of the country, which is civilized, and you live in the wildlands, so you must be savage. But it explores, the savagery within us, the human condition on savagery, on how different people behave to different situations and setbacks, and the things that can make us snap and become a savage, no matter how civilized our veneer is. And how sometimes the people who we think are just gonna bar, like barbarians, are actually capable of behaving much more civilly than the people who pride themselves on how much more advanced they are. So he really does explore the whole imperialist view of conquered peoples and how they're savages and shouldn't be taken seriously. But it's very, very good, and I want to reread it for sure. So now that I've been talking about these, I realize that this video has gone on for 17 minutes, and this video is going to be super long if I end up talking about the short fiction as well. So, a way to extend the series. So what was a 3-part series is now a 4-part series. And this video will be on his standalones, and the next one will be on the short fiction and his novellas and his story collections. So please You could start with any of these standalones. I would not start with Sharps, and that's because I didn't like it the most. But I think that the folding knife is a great place to start, just because of how strong Basso is as a central character. So, have you read any of these? Which one of them is your favorite? And if you haven't read any, you should go read one. Go read The Folding Knife. It's so good. It's so good. Come back and tell me that Basso is not one of the smartest characters that you have read in fantasy. So, guys, that is it for me for today. Now that I have extended the series. As always, information about my Patreon and Discord is down in the description, and I'll see you next time, guys.